Good evening, good evening, good evening. What do you get when you cross two of the handsomest men in the ASTV universe and the stand-in for Shamu, the whale? You get the EPL panel show on Wednesday night instead of Tuesday night because the Premier League likes to mess with everybody's schedules and have midweek matches after the FA Cup, which, we could talk about that, but I don't think there's any big surprises worthy of talking about. Everybody that got through is supposed to get through, I think, except for United.
And us.
Well, yeah, but we don't like to laugh at Brentford, but we do love to laugh at Manchester United. But we've got Alan as well, another handsome chappy there. But no Spurs fan for you to laugh at tonight, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
We'll laugh at them for a little bit. I have a little soccer game to go to as well, so
we will have Alan momentarily then, and then we'll sub him out early like he is Charles Kwanzaa at the start of the season. But let us not delay any further. There was games yesterday, games today, and games tomorrow as well. So we can I don't know what that one means, but we'll have to go back to that. Here are the scores for this match day weekend. Brentford, the North London derby. There you go. You with your little what you call acronyms there that I don't understand. But a full program of games that haven't even been completed. That's how bad we are at this time of the year. But we will start before Alan. We'll go through those games, but we definitely want to talk about the one from today. Arsenal and Spurs. North London derby. It's derbies aren't easy for anybody, and we've all got derbies to talk about where you're the form team and then things just don't work out on the day. But Alan, this worked out exactly as you would expect it right now. A very narrow and maybe fortuitous win for Arsenal, but Spurs continuing to nosedive like the Spurs we all know and love from decades and decades and decades. But you must be happy with that win.
Yes.
I mean, it really needs no more than that. But I mean, a good win for Arsenal in terms of the race for the title, but also to maybe put the final touches on Big Ange probably getting sacked fairly soon if it keeps going like this.
If it keeps going like this, Big Ange, unfortunately, is a good manager and all. I can see him getting sacked. This is 6 losses in 8 Premier League games. I don't see many top 6 managers ever surviving that unless you're in the start of your season or the start of your first freshly in. Like Amarin, I think Amarin has lost many games as well in the Premier League and also drawn a lot, but he's also shown progression, drawing with Liverpool, drawing with us, and then winning in a penalty shootout at the end this past Sunday. We don't have to talk about that too much, but but at the same time, it's like I don't know. It's like these players just aren't buying into him and just have struggled to. I mean, I see all the injuries that they have, but I just don't see it for Ange being there much longer. The last time they had a cup final, they fired the manager before that match, so maybe he lasts until February, and then who knows. But as far as Arsenal is concerned, that's what's what I'm worried about. And it's a beautiful win. It's a great win, 2-1 against the rivals. And it gets us closer in the title race, which is more important than anything. So we're now 4 points behind. You guys have a game in hand, but it's a little easier if you guys go only 7 games up or 7 points up instead of 9 points up. So
about the game, Alan, I listened to it on the radio as is my demands these days as I travel to and from place to place for work, and it seemed like at least at the very end, Arsenal were almost clinging on, but as powerful as Spurs' attack is, they're always leaving themselves open at the back, especially with Big Ange's tactics with their best team. But with all the injuries they have, it's almost walking the plank up voluntarily. Did you think that there was a chance Spurs could pull a goal back, or were you comfortable enough knowing that even if they did, there was still going to be opportunities for Arsenal, even without with the striker issues? Spurs just leave themselves so open at the back that like a 10-year-old team could probably score against them at this point.
I think both teams really left themselves open. They were both going for it, especially in the second half. It seemed like Arsenal were going to get that third goal, but unfortunately, we just couldn't. We couldn't clean our chances. We couldn't get them in. Odegaard had a really good shot that just went wide a little bit. It's just a little typical as it's been for us as far as like our finishing has been. We've had a very high XG over the last three matches. This includes the 2 cup matches and our match against Tottenham today, and we've only scored 3 goals out of that. So it's just a little bit of just the finishing nature of us right now isn't going. The balls aren't just going in the net. And as far as Tottenham is concerned, as far as them scoring today, I thought they were a threat until they took off Son. I don't think Anne should have taken off Son. I think he made him. I think if Son was still in the game and then brought in, I forgot who he brought in, but it was another attacking player. If they had still had Son with that, they probably would have scored. But as soon as I saw Son come off, I thought we could handle business. It came close a little bit, but it didn't get too close. They didn't have a single shot on target after they scored that goal. So,
let me ask you this. Liverpool fans are kind of slightly concerned that there might be a dip right now, and it's a dip where, if we are having a dip, we're coping with it reasonably well. We're not losing games. We're not winning them, but we're not losing them either necessarily. But for Arsenal, every little stutter step that the teams above you take is always a good stutter step for the teams that are chasing. Forest and Liverpool, do you think that game couldn't have come at a better time for Arsenal this week?
It came at a perfect time, and us responding with a win the next day is just as important in anything in the mentality of the team. I've seen it last season where City will drop points and Arsenal wouldn't take advantage of that. Either with I think there was a weekend where where City dropped points and Villa beat us. So there's that as well. So, or it was a Fulham, one of the other. But I think this year we've had opportunities to also gain back some of those points, and we haven't until today. So let's hope that if this continues, if this little slip from Liverpool goes on, that Arsenal keep on getting points. Of course, we do have another tough matchup this weekend against Shea's Villa. So,
well, that's a perfect segue into asking Shay. Let's expand the conversation about Spurs. Ange has to be hanging on by a thread at this point. I mean, he's a great personality to have in the league. He's almost like an Australian, what was his name? Ian Holloway. He's a personality. He's a character. But in terms of the coach and stuff, we talked before about how he kind of made a massive rod for his own back by saying he always wins a trophy in his second season. But even if Spurs do win like the League Cup, if they happen to get past Liverpool in that second leg of the semi-final and happen to win it, the league form is really going to be the thing that does them in, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Like Alan said, they're on a big time slump. Like 6 games they haven't won or a draw, so a point at all these matches. That's not acceptable for a team of their caliber, especially when they've spent the amount of money they have spent. And it's kind of we've talked about it in the show. Like he is an attacking first coach, but Spurs have always been known to have a pretty solid defense. Like even when Jose was there, they're always very solid at the back, and they haven't been this year. And I think that's their biggest issue. And like I said, once you took Son off, they lost every bit of attacking threat that they had, and they weren't able to compete. I don't know if they're going to be able to last. I think it would be stupid to fire him before the final, but we have seen crazier things. The new manager bounce. Sometimes they always come in and win the games they're supposed to. But the question is, who will they go after to get as the manager? Like, I don't know anybody that's available without having to buy out somebody from a team, or who wants to take this team in their current form. With 6 months left remaining in the season, do you want to have somebody temporary, or you just kind of keep him in the season, just make sure he doesn't get relegated? If they get relegated, then yeah, for sure. But I don't think that would happen. They're still too good enough to not be that bad. So I'm going to give him at least if he can win the cup, that'll give him at least a little bit of a hope of staying. But I don't see him making it towards the end of the season.
I think though, if given that they had Andre Villas-Boas and they have Ange now, if they want to keep going for the deep voice coaches, they could go for Sean Dyche after Ange.
Honestly,
Keep that track going. Like,
Please, I want that. I want Sean.
or
Dyche.
the always classic Steve Bruce. He's somewhere around there floating in England. Somebody will pick him up.
literally, he's buoyant.
Scott Parker.
England's brave Scott, but he's doing okay though, isn't he? England's brave Scotty Parker with Burnley or whoever. So it might not be him, but I definitely think they should look at Sean Dyche. We'll never get the grin off Alan's face for months and months and months if that happened. Glenn, we've talked before about managers not changing the principles versus changing the principles. Big Ange is not for changing. That's it's one thing to do, as we talked about for Thomas Frank, for one game, to do something that's different, to very much different to what you're used to doing. But when you have extenuating circumstances, that's an okay excuse, isn't it, for a manager to say, look, the 4-2-3-1, it's not going to work with the kids as our central defenders and the tea lady and the guy who puts the corner flags out. We're going to have to do something radically different to get through this part. But there is a whole sense of living by the sword, dying by the sword with Ange, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. And yeah, he's had the perfect conditions to be like, okay, my philosophy is this, but I don't have the personnel to make that happen right now. So, therefore we need to adapt. It wouldn't even be any failure of his methods. It would actually be quite smart adapting to the situation he's in. But, it's funny. They were so passive, right, Alan, in the first half. I watched the game today. Classic North London derby, right? Arsenal all over Spurs, 20, 30 minutes, go up the other end. Quite a good finish, but a lucky enough goal, through a crowd from Son. Typical North London derby against the run of play. But, Ange said it after the game. He was just appalled by how passive Spurs were. They didn't show up for the derby. It was a really awful performance. And the fact they took the lead, I think took the sting out of the effort in the first half because they got in front. But across the 90 minutes, the first Arsenal goal shouldn't have stood because it wasn't a corner. It is what it is. And a few commentators afterwards were saying, Arsenal were lucky, benefited from a clear refereeing error. On the whole, Arsenal were by far the better team. Yes, they were a little bit shaky, right? Yes, at the end of the game, and I agree with you, Alan, that if Son should have stayed on, he's not having a great season. It's just, you don't know if he's fully fit at the minute. He's so off it. And I think Son is somebody I think who embodies Spurs. He's frenetic, he's exciting, he's really talented. And the fact he's having such a bad season really, I think, epitomizes what's going on at Spurs, right? They're misfiring. And if your talisman's misfiring, the rest of your team probably will as well. But I just want to, draw us back to the FA Cup, right? Mackie, you mentioned that at the start of the show. This passive loss comes on the back of 90 minutes of not scoring against Tamworth in the FA Cup, comes against them, Tamworth being robbed of a replay because of the rule changes there. And, Spurs, they scored 3 in extra time. I didn't realize when I first saw the score in the morning that it went to extra time. I looked at it. I thought, regulation win, perfectly normal. I had no idea until later on in the day they hadn't. They took them 120 minutes to beat them. And what stood out to me about the North London derby as well, I think that was Spurs didn't have a shot on target after the goal. It really sums up that this was a really sorry effort. And yes, they're good in attack, and we know they have the players. And Ange tried to mix it up, right, bringing Maddison and Johnson on at halftime, I think it was. But his philosophy is too rigid. There's too many injuries in the squad, but Brentford are another team with injuries, and you just kind of make do. I appreciate that the key players, especially the quick centre backs we've talked about before, are pretty central to the way he plays, and they're not around. But I don't think he's going to last very long. I think North London derby twinned with the Tamworth effort, twinned with all the results beyond that. And honestly, if you take the Liverpool EFL Cup win and the Man City Etihad win away, it has been an extraordinary, dismal couple of months. And honestly, the only good time Ange has had as manager was that opening spell, right? I think he had a great start as soon as he joined the club, catching everyone's eyes. If you look at his form after that period, it is really abysmal. And the fact that Tottenham are currently the 6th best team in London in the table says it all, I think.
Alan, let me ask you this, because we don't want to, hurt your feelings and all that, but there's a reaction to be had from losing to Manchester United in the FA Cup.
Drawing.
But yeah, but you know what I mean. Like Arsenal did what you want your team to do. They came out and they got a win in another big game in terms of the atmosphere and the magnitude of it. A derby, especially the North London derby, it's a big game, and you have to you get the bragging rights until the next one. As an Arsenal fan, then you want that reaction. Do you think maybe that the insipid performance against Tamworth for 90 minutes is making some of the Spurs players look at Big Ange going, nah, he's not the one for us, and I'm getting embarrassed here at this point. If you're Madison, you're not getting the start. Are you thinking this guy doesn't fancy me, so why should I put in the extra effort? The sooner he's gone, the better for me. It's a really, it seems like there's no reaction being elicited from Spurs the way Arsenal clearly got, Arteta clearly got a reaction from the Arsenal players.
I mean, let's look at this. I mean, I can bring up the situation back in 2019 with Unai Emery. The players just wanted him gone after the Europa League final. They didn't buy in anymore. That season, the run up to that final, Unai basically gave up on Champions League football through the league and bet everything on the Europa League, and just had a poor performance. I don't know why you would start. I don't know why he would have started Cech over Petr Cech over Leno that day, and that's indicative of that's similar to what's happening now. Just poor choices of having Madison on the bench, Son taken off. I mean, players are just not going to buy in if the coach is not buying into some of their star players. And I mean, Unai Emery with had that with Ozil as well. And I mean, Ozil had his issues towards the end, and maybe he should have been gone instead of Alexis Sanchez, in my opinion. But I mean, he was just given this big money contract, and Emery wanted to set a tone with that season and say that this is my team, and you're not going to take that away from me. But the players just didn't buy in because they didn't believe in him. Arteta did the same thing with Aubameyang. Aubameyang was given all that money, and the players bought in when he said, fuck this guy, he's got to go. And I think Ange is having that problem right now where he's just not commanding the locker room as he wants to. He's allowing the players to dictate things, and he's not being forthright with his philosophy, and he can be as rigid as he wants. He doesn't have the players to do what he wants to do at Spurs. And if the players are just not going to buy in, then I think it's time to make a change. And even if it's before the next EFL Cup match, I mean, just take your losses. The players aren't buying in. Just go on, make a move. Ange can go fuck off to Real Madrid, because they're definitely going to look for a new manager this offseason. So
I think we all have a chance of being in for that Real Madrid job now.
We all do.
For them. But Shay, let me ask you this question now, because Alan touched on it there. Unai Emery wasn't a fit for Arsenal. I mean, you could say he did some good things as outsiders because we weren't suffering, for whatever the bad results were. But he found his home, it seems, in Aston Villa. That that's a club that needed a manager like Unai Emery, and Unai Emery needed a club like Aston Villa who had ambition but weren't getting the right personalities. Is it possible that for all the parading at the start, Ange is not Spurs? It's just not the good place for him, and he's not the manager for them. And there's probably a club, probably in Belgium or somewhere like that Ange is going to be fantastic. Well, probably back in Japan even. Where he used to coach, I believe, where he'll find his feet and his ideas will be, run through the entire thing, and he'll have such success, and that Spurs will. No, let's scrap that half of the equation. They'll never find the manager they want, because they'll fire him as soon as he looks like he's going to get success. I mean, they've had Mourinho and Conte at this point, and Pochettino. But I think for Ange, there has to be a destination club for him, and it's not Spurs, is it?
Yeah, and it's not Spurs, and maybe it's not on Ange. Like I said, he's having his issues, but like Colin said too, they probably don't respect him, and that could just be the egos of these players. Like, they've also been very comfortable at the squad for a long time, and I think Jose Mourinho kind of touched on that. Some of these players are still there from him, and they're still dealing with it. he said the same thing at United. I think Spurs and United are almost on the same path when it comes to the personnel that they have. You get stuck with these big contracts. Nobody wants to buy them. And then with Spurs, the owner, Daniel Levy, he is slimy. Like, he always tries to cheap out on transfers when they need players, but it always lowball it. He did it to us for years, trying to get Jack Grealish for literally nothing. Like, the running joke is, hey, we'll give you $3 million for Jack and Josh Onuma. We're like, that is horrendous. Why are we going to give up our star player for £3 million? Like, that does nothing. So I think that also affects the managers that go there, because, like I said, at the end of the day, Daniel Levy, he'll spend the money, but it's almost like United spending. They'll spend it on a player that they probably shouldn't have, when they could have gone for maybe 2 or 3 pieces that would have helped them out in the long run. And then when they do end up buying these players, they can't get rid of them. Like, I think James Maddison now, like, he kind of showed, he always had that moxie to him, like, oh, he should be playing at some bigger clubs. He did well, I think, the first year, but then he's, like I said, fell out of favor, and now he's not doing himself any justice, so they're going to get stuck with him. Nobody's going to pay him. He's probably, 30 years old now. Nobody's going to pay a high fee for him. He may end up kind of like how James Ward-Prowse did, just kind of go back to Leicester, or like go to a mid-table club and just make your name and just put your head down and do what you need to do. I think when they sold Kane, they didn't really buy what they needed to buy. I think that's what also has hurt them a lot. They've lost that goal threat, like how Glenn said, Son, if he's not firing, nobody else is. Kulusevski isn't been like that great. We obviously know who is it? Richarlison has been god awful. Like, that's just a terrible player that they have bought. Like,
that's who he brought in for Son.
Yeah, you bring on Richarlison, who hasn't done anything. Like, that was probably the worst money spent out of any club in almost any league for a long, long time. And it's stuff like that. I think Ange sees that. He's got these prima donnas on this team he can't do anything with. And at the end of the day, they're like, well, I get paid X amount of pounds a week. What are you going to do? He's the manager. And like, I brought it up, multiple times, because Villa went through this years ago. Like, in American sports, you get cut. If you're not doing the job you're supposed to do, you get cut. Soccer, for some reason, they don't do it. I understand you sign a contract, buy them out, push them to the curb. And you should be able to bring in some free agents, or, tell them straight up, we're done. We're not going to sell you. It is what it is. We'll take this loss. You have to suck it up, but get rid of them. Because I think once you get rid of that locker room cancer, then everybody else kind of, they get put on edge. So maybe whatever manager comes in, he's going to have to start from the bottom to rebuild this team the right way. But I just don't see it happening with Ange. I think, like Colin said, that he's lost the locker room, and he's a very big ego himself. Like, we've seen him talk. He's very stern and very stubborn when he does his interviews. So I think they're all butting heads, and now Levy and company are trying to figure out what do they do.
It is what it is, mate. Well, here, 2 final things before we move on. Number 1, Richarlison is the kind of forward that makes you glad you have Darwin Núñez. And number 2, James Maddison is going to end up at Southampton or something like that. That's his destination, and he's wasted all of that talent at Spurs, and where good players go to die, as they say.
I can't believe there were a lot of Arsenal fans that wanted him over Odegaard.
I mean, at the time, he's a good player.
Yeah, at the time. Yeah.
Well, like, he would have been better off at Arsenal than at Spurs. It's just complete waste of time there. And that's the club that had Glenn Hoddle and Chris Waddle and did nothing with them. But we love it. We love to see it. Let's go back to the scores. Let's talk about this top one here, Glenn. I'm a fantastic lover of your manager. You have posters on my wall. They're destroyed, so they are. But Brentford 2, City 2. I haven't seen the game, but I can imagine that Brentford played the way Thomas Franks wants Brentford to play, and it caused City all sorts of problems. Tell me about that game. Am I talking through my hat, or is that the way it went down?
No, it was a great game. You've got to watch the highlights, Macca. Stick the extended highlights on. It was thrilling. It was end-to-end for most of it. And, I'm always surprised, watching 90 minutes of Man City, which I do less now that they're obviously not at the top of the table. They just seem so devoid of tempo. And, when they've come to, our place, the G-Tech, before, they've passed it round us for what feels like hours. And you can see the quality and confidence they have. And they're just really devoid of that right now. It's very odd because the players are pretty much the same, right? You know that? They had Foden, De Bruyne, Haaland, Savinho was all right, I think, on the right wing, I think it was. They have bags of talent. And, yeah, they just didn't offer very much, especially in the first half. They just looked quite lackluster. And yeah, we played really well. Chances here and there in the first half, but as you can tell from the score sheet, it really, the game caught fire in the second half. We had 4 goals, and what stuck out to me from this game was Phil Foden got a brace in about 10 minutes. And usually, right, any other season, Man City with a 2-goal lead, you're not going to come near that, right? Especially that late. He scored the second 76th minute. So a confident, firing Man City team, that's not going to, it's insurmountable, that lead, really. And what they would do is they would dominate the game, right? They'd have the tempo, they'd pass it around, they'd make you chase shadows, job done. They'd probably nick a third. However, because this Man City team just feels like a shadow of its, iconic self, they just, even the second they scored the second, this was a sense, the G-Tech went quiet for a couple of minutes, but the players' heads didn't go down. And, Johan Wissa got 1 goal back to make it 2-1 to them in the 82nd minute. Beautiful ball from Damsgaard to unlock the defense. He has been magnificent. He's honestly, across the Premier League, not just Brentford, across the whole league, he's one of my players of the season at the minute. He has been magnificent for us. Chips the ball over the top. Mads Ruslev, who made an error for one of Foden's goals, our much maligned right back, who's probably a few steps down from the quality he needs to be in this league, but he got his foot on it at the back post. Great knock across. Wissa, great touch, scores a goal, and he becomes our leading ever goal scorer in the Premier League, overtaking Ivan Toney, who hasn't been missed that much, right? It's very, very surprising, and this underlined that. Anyway, gets to added time. We keep pushing. Christian Norgard, who had a heroic game in midfield, absolute talisman of ours, gets his head to a cross. I think it was Keane Lewis Potter put in a beautiful cross, gets his head to it, equalizer, 90+2. Incredible scenes at the G-Tech, one of those games I wish I was there. And honestly, we have been a bit of a bogey team for Man City. One season we beat them home and away. This season we've nicked a point at the death. And yeah, we were fantastic. And every player who played had a really strong game. And as I said, Ruslev was weaker, but it was nice to see him get the assist. It was really good to see. And yeah, Damsgaard, Wissa, Brian Mbumo, the fact that he came away from this game with no goals, no assists was incredible because he was electric. And I know, Alan, Arsenal, among other teams, among other suitors, have their eye on him. We're reading this transfer window, probably would be a summer move. But he, for me, alongside Damsgaard, Brian Mbumo is one of the best players, I think, in the Premier League. I don't think he's close to that. He's not at the elite tier, right? But he's just below that. And I think we showed everything we wanted to. And the fact, Macca, this came after Plymouth came to our place at the weekend, turned us over with a real shock win. I said on our podcast last week, I was actually overconfident for once. I said, yeah, Plymouth the bottom of the table. We're doing all right. We'll beat them. It's fine. And we put in a really insipid performance. We played a bit like Spurs did for the first half for 90 minutes and offered nothing. And they deserved their win, and credit to Plymouth. So for us to have that result, and that's been the character that's kind of summed up our season. We've bounced back from really, really disappointing results super well. And yeah, it was a thrilling game. Grab a beer and stick on those extended highlights at some point, because it was a game for the neutral as well.
Let's diverge very quickly because we're going to lose Alan to the Church of Adidas fairly soon. Arsenal are playing Villa. We'll get Shay's opinions on that later, but tell us what you're thinking about this game this weekend, Alan.
It's a match that always gets
us. Actually, this is a grudge match between you two, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a match between the two of us, and it's usually a match that gives us trouble. Luckily, not luckily, we actually played really well. At the start of the season, we played Villa at Villa and got a win off of that, and very happy to do so. When last season they got 2 wins off of us and could rightfully add to the "we cost Arsenal the league" chants and all that stuff, like Newcastle and Fulham can say. But I just want to make this challenge to Mr. Shea. There is a bottle here of Malort.
I don't want that.
You don't want that? I'm just saying, loser has to take a shot.
That's fine. I've done many of those, so it's nothing for a man like me.
So if you can find,
there we have it, folks. A reason to tune in next week.
I'll go to the pizza joint down the street from my house, a Chicago style pizza place. They got Malort there, so
they got Malort there. All right,
they
sounds good.
We got everything there, man. But
I'm doing dry January as well, so I can only take a little bit of a shot.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we win.
Hopefully we win.
That's more moist January, I think, when you think about it. But Alan, go enjoy your game. Stay safe, and we will talk to you the next time. Let me ask you this, Shay, before we get back to Glenn about the game. City, they're up and down. They're stumbling. They're getting themselves back up. They're stumbling again. They're like one of you or Alan are going to be at the end of this season with all these shots, challenges of my lord. But the news came out during the week that he's getting divorced from his wife. We're not going to here to speculate about, his private life. It's neither here nor there for us. But I will say there was a similar kind of time for Jose Mourinho a good few years ago where he had marriage troubles. I don't know whether he ended up getting divorced, but there definitely was like gossip in the press, and he's never been the same since. Do you think the kind of domestic side of Pep's life is encroaching on his professional life, and that's why he's not able to do the thing he normally does, which is find solutions to problems, also known as spending a ton of cash on them? But he has done nothing, and he's spoken openly about regretting not bringing players in during the summer. This is the most discombobulated I can ever remember seeing Pep Guardiola, and it's really weird to see, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like I said, I definitely think it does have an effect because, they've been married for 30-something years. So, like, that's somebody he's been with for a while. But I do think it is because, at the end of the day, he's worried about that. And then, of course, the performance of the club is also weighing on him. But he's trying to battle two things at the same time, which is very difficult, regardless of, who it is. Yes, we don't like Pep as much. People can say what they want. But I think how you said not bringing in the players that they needed, which is crazy because we've seen City spend hundreds of millions of dollars on this. I think the Savinho one coming in, like how we said, we all kind of questioned it because it was just a basically in-house transfer. They just paid their sister team money to bring them in. Something they probably would have done in a couple years. Maybe they jumped the gun too early to bring him in. I don't know if he was fully ready. He's played well. I'm not saying he hasn't, but they could have also use that money to maybe buy another CDM, because I think we have seen with Roger going down, that whole team has completely just imploded, which is wild to say because there's so much talent still on that team. They shouldn't be struggling. But I just think he was that important to him that he basically held the glue. And I think with him going down, that has affected everybody else's play style because they can't do what they used to do. They're not running the system the right way that Pep has instilled in all these clubs that he's been at. Because, if you look even back his Barcelona days, he had Sergio Busquets basically did the same thing. Literally did nothing but just sat there and held the glue.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really score or, wasn't very fast, but he was there. It let Messi become Messi. He did it at Bayern. I think Xabi Alonso was right there at the very end of his career, and I forgot who their CDM was.
And Philippe Lam occasionally as well.
Yeah. Philippe Lam right at the end, and then he ended up moving Kimmich, I think, right before he left to City. But I think Kimmich kind of went from right back to CDM. So he's always had that center glue piece. I think losing that has made him question everything that he's done because he can tell that Nunez and Kovacic aren't it. And then obviously with the personal things going on, he can't handle it as well as he wants to, because at the end of the day, they're going to be asking him these questions. He doesn't need to answer those things. Like, that's none of our business, but you know how the media is. They're going to harp on that, and they're going to start their rumblings are like, oh, this is affecting him. And even though it isn't, he's probably kept it very close to his chest. Now that we found out about it, everybody's going to start murmuring, kind of like, oh, well, maybe this is the reason for it. Maybe, I don't know if they'll spend any money in January. We haven't really seen anybody being linked with them. So I don't know if he's attempting to do it or if the club just kind of like, hey, we're pretty safe. Obviously, they're also probably still worried about the charges if anything does happen. So they may just say, look, just finish in the top 10, which is crazy to say for a club like that has been that good for so long. But they may just be doing that and say, hey, summer comes, we're going full rebuild, quote unquote, and then give him a little break maybe or something. So we obviously want it to keep happening for the league because finally this year we will have a new winner. The City are too far off. I don't see them turning it around anytime soon.
Glenn, just one interesting thing about that though, when you're talking about when Shay was talking about Rodri there, Kimmich in there for this that and Busquets, is that Pep Guardiola was that central defensive number 6 midfielder. And I remember watching him play. I remember Liverpool being speculated to buy him under Gerard Houllier. So it seems like his entire system is built on a player that reminds him of himself. So for Brentford, we don't have, unfortunately, a historical record of how Thomas Frank played. But if I imagine he was like a fullback or a midfielder. He just looks like that wiry player who got up and down the field. It doesn't really matter what position he played in. But if you think about his organizational skills and all that, is there a player on the Brentford team that kind of you could say that's Frank's coach on the field? That's his guy. Who would that be for Brentford?
That is such a good question. I love that, Maka. It's tough to say, isn't it? Do you think going forward, Brandon Bumo is somebody who really encapsulates Brentford's, aggressive, dynamic, quick flowing style? But if there's a player that really sums up Brentford, I mean, Christian Norgard is such a rock at the heart of the defense. I mean, he is maybe not quite as important, but he has a Rodri-esque, importance to the Brentford midfield, which is, as we talked about, I think during the live watch along of the Arsenal game, if Norgard's playing, the whole team is better. And if he's absent, the whole team is worse. Probably one of those two, I think. Although, there's something, about just how well Damsgaard's playing. There's something about Damsgaard just this season, right? He's such the Brentford Thomas Frank model, which is you kind of pluck a player, not from obscurity, but he had an injury, right? He scored that free kick against England in the Euros, got a lot of interest around that, but then he had a really bad chronic injury. He comes to Brentford. He has a really underwhelming couple of first seasons, and I was thinking this is not a relationship that's going to really work. He was just always pushed off the ball. He just couldn't get his foot in games. And honestly, anyone watching, I'd just say watch 20, 30 minutes of Brentford, watch the highlights of the Chelsea game, and just watch what Damsgaard does, because he's doing everything that Christian Eriksen did for us in that incredible, memorable spell. And he really just does, sum up the Brentford model, which I love as well. So there's a couple of players. I don't think there's anyone quite as clear-cut as Rodri, but I think it's such a good question. But one of those three, I think at least this season, for me, really sums up everything good about Brentford right now.
Thomas Frank was a midfielder. I just checked. I was right. Who was right? It was me, wasn't it?
Norgard then. It's got to be Christian Norgard.
There you go. Let's look at the other scores. We don't have our resident Fulham fan here to talk about the Graham Potter revolution starting on his turf. But before we like Forest and Liverpool, we'll talk about the Liverpool side of things tomorrow on our Thursday show. But Shay, before we talk about Villa Everton, Forest are the real deal at this point. You can't say anything other than, they might not win. They probably statistically won't win the Premier League and do a Leicester. But Nuno Espirito Santos is the real deal. He is the manager Spurs should have now, but they were too short-sighted to see what they had, because he's turned that team into a force, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I've completely, went blank. Yes, he was at Spurs too and literally had them running and doing well. Again, they jumped the shit too early. Oh, we're firing him for no reason. And now look at him. He's literally showing what he can do with a team of players that are, like we said, truly a bunch of misfits, because they're all just a bunch of random players that they have acquired over the years. But he's got them all believing and playing the way that he wants them to play. And I think they've bought into the system. They've showed, hey, we will listen to the manager, and look what he's doing. He's doing wonders. Basically the same thing that Emery did for us last year. Came in, the players finally bought in. There's the same squad that Gerrard had. Nothing changed. And with this Forest team, the fact that Chris Wood has been absolutely on fire is mind-boggling to me, because even when he was at Burnley, I didn't think he was all that great. Just a big dude up top. We've kind of got away from that target man style of play, the old school Christian Benteke years, even Romelu Lukaku and all that. And he's basically proven there's still a need for that style of play if you have the right players around you to do it. I saw that tweet too about them. They could potentially pull a Leicester, but I just think it's going to be too difficult. They have had a great run. I just don't see it. I think, like I said, with Arsenal kind of just being there, and then, like I said, you guys, Liverpool have been very decent, very solid this whole year or so. It's going to be tough for them. But I definitely see them finishing second or third. So
So while we have you already talking and lubricated, we will get on to the return of David Moyes, but that's a good away result for Villa today. Or yes, it was today, wasn't it?
Yeah, today.
Yeah, today. Especially as there's always that new manager bounce in the first 2 or 3 games of a new manager coming in. And in Everton's case, remarkably, because he won nothing, but a legend in their recent history returning as well. But Villa need points on the board now, especially with the European kind of break in games to show that Unai Emery's ideas still work. It just coping with those extra European games for the players, not necessarily for him, was maybe a bit of a burden. But it must be good to see Villa getting back on track.
Oh yeah, for sure. Just to see Ollie, get his 9th goal of the season. Everybody keeps saying he's got a down year, which he should be top. He has missed some very easy chances for a caliber striker that he is. He's been at that point of being one of the best in the Premier League for the last couple of years. And just finally getting a clean sheet. I don't think we've had a clean sheet for a long time. So that was absolutely huge just for the confidence of Emi Martinez and the back line. Like I said, that's been one of our biggest issues all year is the defense, which is mind-boggling because last year they were very good. This year they have not. And then I know we're trying to move Diego Carlos and bring in a couple of other defenders. So we don't know what the back line is going to look like. And then with these upcoming European matches, we have a chance to make it to the next stage of the knockouts, something that we haven't been able to do for a while. And Alan kind of said it earlier when Emery was at Arsenal. He kind of gave up on the Champions League and the league. And we've had this discussion in this podcast earlier too. Like, what would you choose? Like, obviously I'd like to win a cup, but I'm not worried about the FA Cup or the EFL Cup right now when you have the Premier League and Champions League matches still to go. So I think he just needs the players to refine that form. I think all the players coming back from injury are going to help tremendously. Like I said, I know we lost Pau Torres and McGinn for a month. So when they get back, we'll have a full squad again. We just got to get them firing. So just this little win in the league, a clean sheet definitely helps. So I know this next match against Arsenal is going to be big. And if we could somehow ruin their chances again, I would absolutely love it. I know Alan would be very pissed off, but it'd be nice to ruin their season once again, just to be there like, here comes the manager that you fired once again, being the thorn in your side.
Let us, before we move on, look at the table. There's the top of it there. Liverpool's still top, but with a game in hand. Still only 1 loss for the season, and that's probably going to be the big difference maker between Liverpool, Arsenal, and then Forest downwards is just the amount of losses rather than draws. Aston Villa back up there, getting back. There was a point in the season, wasn't there, Shay, where you looked like you were heading more towards the relegation zone than the European places, but back on track by the looks of things. And same amount of points as City. If City can say they're having a half decent season, then Villa surely can say the same thing. Brentford there, just poking their nose in on the top 10. Glenn, what's with this rudeness here? Upsetting the apple cart, but I'm all for it. I'm all for that. And then Chelsea dropping places. Newcastle, probably in the pop chart terminology, Newcastle are firing themselves up there, and that they could be the dark horses, couldn't they?
Yeah, I think so. So the last team to beat them was Brentford at the G-Tech, and since then they've won 9 in a row, I think, across league and cups. So, I watched the Arsenal game in the EFL Cup. Really impressive performance there, and Eddie Howe's got them firing, hasn't he? And in Isak, they probably have certainly the most in-form striker in the league. I mean, arguably the best, maybe equal best with Haaland. They're different players, and you look at Haaland at his best, you'd probably pick Haaland for your team. But I mean, no one's doubting Isak's quality. And, if you're an Arsenal fan, you just must be tearing your hair out because you just think if you had a player of his caliber leading your line, that is what you need. That's what you need to be on the same points as Liverpool, to be right at the top. So, yeah, he's got them firing. They look exciting. Lewis Hall's playing brilliantly. Anthony Gordon, I think he's got assists and goals in about his last 6 games. They have a really good balanced team. And they're good to watch. They play good football. And you know what they're doing? They're just scoring a stack of goals. 3 against Wolves earlier. Got the great win at United as well, and they just keep getting the score sheet. 4 at Ipswich, 3 against Shays Villa. They're racking up the goals. 4 against Leicester City. That started this run. That was their bounce back from the loss of the GTEC. So, yeah, they're the team to watch at the minute. It was Chelsea, right? We talked on this pod, and I was quite a strong advocate, I think, for Chelsea's momentum and for their quality. And like they were the team. They were the it team for a couple of weeks. I would say that's Newcastle now. I think they're the form team in the division. Chelsea are falling away a bit. More disappointment today. You've got to be beating, as good as Bournemouth are, which they're great. You've got to be beating them at home if you want to be in the top 2, 3. Yeah, eyes on Newcastle, because they got quality across the squad. And it's funny because Eddie Howe, he seemed a bit dissatisfied a few weeks ago. It seemed like he wasn't happy with things off the pitch. He seemed a bit depressed.
I think that's just his face.
Yeah, because Jason Tyndall's the one to.
Like, hey, is he gonna get fired? And here he is. He basically saved his job again and showed.
Yeah, exactly.
You really can't call out, I would say, because I don't think they haven't really changed anything. They just found a really good form, and maybe the whole team.
They found their groove. Yeah, and players like Jacob Murphy, right? I don't think he'd be on the players to watch for many teams in the top 4. So consistent, so good. So yeah, I've watched a couple of their games in recent weeks, and they just look extremely confident. So yeah, I reckon, Macca, if you're looking at the ones to watch, Forest are doing incredibly to be 3rd, and again to even could have been more, but to get a point against Liverpool, good result at home. But Newcastle are exciting, aren't they? They're the ones that are really firing right now.
But I will caution Newcastle fans who might be rubbing their big fat naked bellies right now at that they are probably an Isaac injury away from dropping away immensely as well, aren't they? It's just the way of the world. Let's look at the bottom half. Brighton there, the team to watch at the very beginning of the season, if I recall correctly. But the form goes against you as the season goes on. But Spurs and United down that low on the table, it's fun to watch. But if you were a Spurs or United fan, not where you expected to be at this point in the season. And then Wolves, Leicester, Southampton, still the ones to watch. Ipswich Town getting dragged into that. But Everton, who we are going to talk about now, because they brought this gentleman back, Gollum from Lord of the Rings, back at Everton. Shay, what do you make of this? I'm of the opinion, never go back. It's just such a bad idea for managers, and I don't know any who have done better. And I believe the BBC on their football page had put on like a statistic that something like 60 to 70% of the time the returning manager is way worse than the first time they were there. Is this a comfort, feel good appointment from the new owners at Everton, or can Moyes actually break the statistic?
I think a little bit of both. The new owners coming in, they probably looked at the history. I'm not sure how well versed they were with Everton when they bought them. I'm not sure what the owner's background in just the English soccer culture is. But like how you said, bringing managers back, I think Chelsea is the only one that's done it in our lifetime of watching Premier League. They fire him, he wins something, they fire him. They bring in somebody else. They suck. Then we'll bring Jose back. He does what he needs to do to win the trophy. They fire him again. I think for at least Everton, when I just looked at the table, I mean, they really aren't doing that bad. Especially when United was only at 23 points. So Sean Dyche was doing what he needed to do. I just think how we've always, we always make fun of it, but they probably were like, we need to have something a little bit more attacking, which I know David Moyes isn't, but he showed at West Ham he can play a good style of soccer, and I think they're hoping that he can probably replicate what he did at West Ham. Like I said, I don't know if they watched him back in the day when he was at Everton and they were constantly fighting for that top 6. Apparently, they also had better players. Tim Cahill, you had can't remember the players, but they had they had a good squad.
Thomas Gravison, wasn't he on that team? The bald
midfielder.
Nutcase.
They had Arteta. They had
James Coleman.
Coleman
when he was 27.
Yeah, they had a good squad back then. So maybe they're trying to hopefully recapture that form of playing that style that they used to play. And I have no issue with David Moyes. I think he was the right manager for United. Ferguson even said it too at the time, but they just the egos and the prima donnas at the club didn't want to respect him for who he was. Replacing a legend like Ferguson, and it's literally I think them firing him has caused all their issues because they didn't believe and give him the chance, and they went against Ferguson's wishes. And I think that's kind of been the bad juju for United. So I think he'll at least steady the ship, at least for this season. I don't think they're going to get relegated. He'll maintain it. And then maybe, in the summer, I don't know what their finances are looking like because I know that they got deducted points and stuff. Obviously, we talked about that earlier. But I think they'll probably be in financial trouble again because the stadium is just taking all that money. I don't know if the new owners technically took that in as new debt or how they're going to go with it. So we'll see what happens in the summer. And then, like I said, new manager bounce too. We're 2-0 against that. So we busted that theory because West Ham's coach just went blank on the coach, but we beat them and we beat Everton. So we got one more new manager we're playing in, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, maybe you'll get Arteta sacked.
Yeah, maybe we can
But Glenn, we talk a lot, obviously, as I mentioned at the start of the show, about Thomas Frank and about understanding his system and getting players to buy in. Now, all joking aside, as a Liverpool fan, I was a big admirer of David Moyes as an actual coach, and my definition of a good coach is always that they have a clear idea of how they want the game to be played, whether you agree with it or not as a fan, but they have a clear idea and they are very good at transmitting that idea to the players. So, Tony Pulis, his football was exhaustingly, disgustingly horrible and boring, but not a single player ever played for him didn't know what they were supposed to do at any moment on the field. David Moyes is of a similar strain, and like Thomas Frank as well. Your players know exactly where they're supposed to be and exactly what they're supposed to do at any given moment, which means they're listening to him on the training field. Moyes has that same thing, but this is Alan's fallen over. But this is this is a new Everton. This is not the Everton of the 1990s. This is a couple of prima donnas by the sounds of things. Calvert-Lewin is even the Everton fans want him gone at this point. It's a mixture of old players, players who are thinking that they're better than they actually are, and maybe some good players that need a bit more guidance, which is probably where he would be the best suited. But is this an Everton team that David Moyes is going to be whipped into shape, or is it basically United 2.0 for him?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the stat that stands out this season that explains pretty much everything is, as of today, I think it's 15 goals in 20 games. I mean, you're not going anywhere above the bottom 5 with a record like that. Calvert-Lewin is the kind of figurehead of this inefficiency in front of goal, right? He's had so many chances. We know there's a player there. He has gone on hot runs for them. He has managed to find the back of the net, but he's been abysmal, unfortunately. And Beto was a poor replacement as well. It's tough, isn't it? Because the thing at the heart of this issue, alongside the lack of goals, is the lack of investment, and that's something that David Moyes, flagged up in one of his first press conferences. Is we understand that there has not been enough invested into the squad, and Ashley Young still starting, he's playing very well to his credit. Don't get me wrong; it's not a criticism, but Ashley Young, starting right back. You've got some players, Harrison, there's some quality there, but I think you get a lot of inconsistent players in this team, right? You look at it, it's like it's like a mediocre squad. If you can get a tune out of them, I don't see this squad without investment, say January, but obviously more importantly in the summer. This isn't a team that's probably going to go above 14th, 15th. And if Sean Dyche had just managed to grab a few more goals, to play a style of football that was slightly more aesthetically pleasing. So what I've heard from the Everton fans is they just hated watching Sean Dyche play football, his team play football for 90 minutes. They hated it. And it felt as if it didn't even matter if they nabbed a few more wins and maybe pushed up a couple of places. They just didn't want to watch it anymore. So Moyes has got a bit of a conundrum, right? He's inheriting the same squad. It's the transfer window now, but I don't know if they've got much, if any, money to spend, but they need a bit more quality in there. He hasn't got much to work with, and I think if he doesn't do particularly well, I think it's going to show the ceiling to this team, and that Dyche was still getting something out of them. They're not in the relegation zone. They're always flirting. They're perennially flirting with relegation, aren't they? There's been so many under Lampard, under all these managers the last 3-4 years. they just haven't had the investment from the ownership. And this is the product of that. And, hiring someone like Sean Dyche to keep you up, sure, you might not get much more than that. So I think it's a tough job that David Moyes has. I think he does have the quality to improve this team. It's a good question, Mac, thinking about what he can offer. But beyond the core back three of Pickford, Tarkowski, Brathwaite, who are all excellent players, you look at the starting 11, and I don't see a huge amount of quality that's going to shoot up the table, right? The new manager bounce, what's that going to take you? A couple of places up at best. So I think the squad, more so than the manager, is the problem here. And I think that's going to be a huge ceiling for Moyes as he tries to work with this group.
Shay, if we can say that Sean Dyche was dragging every single piece of effort out of that team for all their limitations, their age, inconsistency, as Glenn quite rightly points out, and maybe even lack of talent in some areas as well. Is it possible that Moyes that they go back to normal almost under Moyes, at least initially, and that puts them in trouble that they don't want to be in? Because if Moyes is trying to play an more expansive type of football, maybe it might get found out. Like, for example, the Ireland national team under Trapattoni, everybody was like, we can't watch Trapattoni's football anymore. We want to see much better football. He gets replaced by Martin O'Neill, who ends up going and doing the same type of negative football because he, as they all quite rightly pointed out, these are the players we have. If Moyes tries to play a more expansive game, will it end up proving Sean Dyche right in what he did because they don't have those players?
I think so. Like you said, just because they don't have the quality to set up attacks and score. Like you said, at the end of the day, Calvert-Lewin is literally the only striker that they have, and they keep playing. So I mean, if Sean Dyche barely got anything out of him, I don't see Moyes doing it. He may get him in better positions, but at the end of the day, Moyes is not the one in front of goal. That is Calvert-Lewin, and that is all on him. So hopefully Moyes can get the players to believe in themselves again, like you said, to get him firing. Like Glenn said, he's probably the most inconsistent striker in the league because, there was that one season he was doing really well, making the England national team and getting rumored with the bigger move, and then just fell off. And then he's got all the tools. He just doesn't do it. I think he's more worried about other things off the field and not worrying about the club and his performances. But he knows that he's safe because who are they going to play in front of him? They don't have anybody that's quality. Like, you don't want to just put a body out there kind of thing and just we got to figure it out. But I don't know. Maybe he makes them play a little bit more attacking. But like you said, if they get found out after that first match where he tries it, then it just shows you that, yes, Sean Dyche was doing literally what he could with nothing. And we don't want Moyes, or like the Everton fans don't want Moyes to have that same kind of situation. But how you said with the Ireland team, they got tired of watching it, but then they're going to realize probably should have just stuck with it until the summer because it's not going to do anything in the short term.
Glenn, we talk about this on the Liverpool-centered podcast shows a lot. Would it be hugely ironic and hilariously funny if the unflushable torch does get relegated with their best manager in 30 years in charge of them finally when it happens?
Yeah, we'll see, right? With a new stadium, of course, the main story really just around the corner. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't think this is a team that has so much quality it can't go down, because you could say that about a couple of teams who are near the bottom. I've always thought that about Crystal Palace, right? No matter how low they've gone, they got players like Mateta and Eze who can light up any team, right? And they got a pretty solid win today against Leicester, who I do think will go down. And yeah, it's tricky. I do think, looking at the table, that the three teams that went up, Leicester, Southampton, Ipswich, they're still probably worse and also not as accustomed to relegation dogfights as this Everton team. I do think this experience of having their backs to the wall for years in a row now, yes, it gets tiresome. Yes, it's depressing. Yes, relegation starts to maybe feel inevitable, but also you have that grit and that determination, and one more win, one more draw, those points can really matter. And yeah, as it stands, I do think this team under David Moyes, with a little bit of backing in the January transfer window, I mean, they really are one decent, consistent winger / forward away from being just a perfectly fine, mediocre, lower mid-table team. It's not a car crash of a squad. Players like Decore are decent. They have decent players, but collectively, there's no spark. I think this team is really, really missing a creative spark that can play well for most games. And obviously, the one thing it's missing, which you're probably not going to get in January, right, Maka, for a good price, is a goal scoring forward. So we'll have to maybe, I think he needs to get a tune out of Calvert-Lewin as best he can and hopefully supplement him and give him some better service. Because once he scores a couple, I'm sure he'll score a couple more. If he got a brace next week, if he gets 2 goals in 2 games, I think he'll feel fine again. But because it's been such a barren run, those one-on-ones feel more and more impossible, don't they, when you're completely out of form? So I think they'll be fine. I think Moyes is a perfectly safe pair of hands. That's the criticism, isn't it? He's too safe. He's too boring. But you flip that on its head and also say, okay, he's safe and competent. I think they'll be fine. But it's not very inspiring. And as you said, I don't think there's much inspiring about the squad. I think they're just not a great bunch.
And maybe he'll also change his mind after 3 weeks of understanding that his goalkeeper has the arms of a T-Rex. And that'll be the worst thing that's happened to him. Let's go and head and look at the fixtures for the coming weekend. And Newcastle and Bournemouth, that would be, for the lads that come on this podcast, that would have been one to talk about. But exactly what we were referring to earlier on. Newcastle, the team in form. Bournemouth, a tricky proposition for everybody. But let's talk about the Brentford side of that second game, Glenn. We'll talk about the Liverpool side tomorrow night on our podcast, which everybody should be following. And if you were liking and subscribing and hitting the like button or smashing it, tapping it gently if you have a dodgy keyboard like mine, you'd know all about this. But Brent, how are you looking at this game? We've had a bit of a dip. We seem susceptible to early goals, and that seems to be something that Brentford could hurt us with. Is this a game that is it a giveaway game, as I used to like to call them when Liverpool weren't challenging for things? It's a game that if you don't win, you don't win because of the opposition. If you get a draw, it's a good result. And if you win, it's a fantastic one. Or is this one where you're looking at Liverpool and you go, we could get something here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we just approach it the same way we did the Man City game in terms of attitude, in terms of style of play, I think Liverpool are, obviously the table speaks for itself, a trickier proposition than this season's Man City. And I wouldn't say we have to approach it in exactly the same way because you've got far more players who are in form and who can hurt us. Obviously, Mo Salah among many, many. You've got a great team, and there's a reason Liverpool are top because they play great football. But I'm really glad we got the equalizer against Man City. We deserved a point. We could have won the game. A couple cleared off the line towards the end of the game as well, right? So I'm glad we had that momentum shift, even within just 190 minutes, to say, okay, brush the Plymouth result aside. We got a great... Every team, whoever you're playing, loves a last-minute equalizer, right? Or a last-minute winner. That's just great for the fans. And I think that's the kind of momentum we need to take into the Liverpool game. I'm worried that you have players that can hurt us where we're vulnerable, which is in our fullback areas. And I think Diaz and Salah are 2 players who can run rings around probably Ruslev and Keane Lewis-Potter. So if I was scouting for Liverpool, that's certainly an area of the pitch where you completely mismatch us, right? Diaz on his day is one of the most direct and quickest and hardest to deal with wingers. And Gakpo, again, is just a player who I can see scoring against us. We can see a lot of goals centrally. If Jota is fit and firing, he's the kind of player, I think he scored against us before. If a Jota starts, I'd feel a Jota goal be inevitable. So what I would say is, you're going to score. We're not going to keep a clean sheet. We need to score, but we also have the players that can hurt you as well. Johan Wissa, he's in brilliant form. And Mbumo is in lightning form, right? Damsgaard, as I keep harping on about today, is like he can unlock defenses. He has that creativity. So looking from a Liverpool point of view, I mean, you've got to be wary. I think Trent's area is somewhere we would have to target, right? That makes sense. And I think we have the players to hurt you on that side as well. So I think it might be a battle of the wingers is how I would think about this. We've both got great attacks. We've both looked a little ropier in defense. I mean, we've been awful. So high scoring game, maybe a 2-2, maybe a 3-2 to someone. And again, I would be shocked. There's one result this won't be, and that's 0-0. This will not be a 0-0 draw, Maka.
So that's 0-0 nailed on. Thanks,
which we'll take. I love that.
Now, Shay, we heard Alan's version of the Arsenal Villa game. Tell me the Villa side, because I think this is one game that Alan can't be overconfident in. I think Aston Villa can actually hurt Arsenal fairly well here. And as much as the Spurs North London derby result was good for them, it did also come courtesy of an own goal from Spurs to kick things off. This is not the Arsenal of last year. Do you have any fear of this Arsenal team at all? Or do you think Arteta will whinge and bore his way into a result because that's all he's doing really when it comes down to it?
I'm not going to be overconfident because even today's match, we struggled in the first half. Like, we looked very lackadaisical. That's been the recurring theme of these matches over the last couple weeks. We let in goals way too early. So if we are able to keep them from scoring in the first half, then, kind of like how Glenn today against City with Brentford, second half it opened up. I'm just worried that the defense, it's like I said, it's just makeshift with Mings coming back from that major ACL injury. Like, he's still not at 100% full form. So that's a weakness that, if Arteta is the manager that he says he is, would try to attack. But in turn, we can also, we score on the counter very quick. So if Ollie can actually put away his chances and not just kind of do his normal move that he always does and then just shove it over the bar, I could see it squeaking out like a 2-1 win, hopefully, and then watching Alan take his little baby shot of my lord.
We'll look at the rest of the games here. Take a look at these. I had highlighted Everton and Spurs in case we had Jake on. West Ham Palace, United Brighton, Forest Southampton. That could be a tricky one, but let's see. Glenn, who is your Tonali's pick for this weekend? Do you see any games that are going to be particularly tricky for the higher seeded team, so to speak?
Yep, there's one game that you can probably guess that's going to take place at the G-Tech, and I hope Brentford can roll over Liverpool.
You're off the show. Shay, where do you have a Tonali pick for this week?
I know we talked about. I'm gonna pick David Moyes. He's gonna get that new manager bounce win and beat Spurs and just keep piling onto that misery. I think this will be the match where he implements the system, kind of like I talked on earlier. If it works, it works. But that would be a big spark for them. I think if they beat Spurs, like Glenn said earlier, it'll spark something in the squad. And like you said, any points you get from now on are going to be vastly important. So that would be a very big momentum swing for them.
I'm going to do Macca's Lock. Pay that money out now. Southampton to beat Forest in a shock win. That's my one because they have to come good at some point, Southampton, and Forest have to slip up at some point. And that's all I'm saying, and I'm sticking to that story until it happens. But maybe Brighton and United. That I don't even know whether that'd be a shock now at this point, would it? With how bad United are, like you'd actually expect Man United to be the Tonali pick in that game, even though they're at home. But a good weekend of games to come. But it's getting into the meat of the seasons of the league season now. Europe coming back up again for us, Shay, and then for Brentford, like the clarity of your league situation now going forward for the rest of it is basically rest between every game and nothing to worry about. I mean that should be a harbinger for a good season for Brentford for the rest of it, shouldn't it, Glenn?
Yeah, I think so. And looking at the games, we're getting to the stage of the season where every result seems to matter, right? That's where it gets really exciting. I think, Maka, like every game's big. I mean, I love your Tonali's pick of Southampton as well. That would be a really fun one, wouldn't it? Just as we get momentum around Forest, wouldn't it be typical Premier League that Southampton, the bottom team, go and get a result? So yeah, I just love this time of the year when every game the pressure notches up right at the bottom of the table, like Everton, like we've been talking about. Liverpool fans, going to Brentford, like that's a tough game. Pressure on you because Arsenal have got a good result tonight, right? Yeah. So this for me is, Christmas is fun because there's always games. It's slightly chaotic. It's kind of hard to follow because they spread them out so much. I kind of love the post-Christmas period because the table starts shaping up. The narratives begin to emerge. And, if you want to stay up or win the title, every game is crucial at this point, from this point onwards. And that's what makes the Premier League so much fun to watch and for us to chat about.
See, Andy Williams was wrong. This is the most wonderful time of the year. So just remains to say then, thank you, gentlemen. Shane, Glenn, it's awesome as always to be on a show, which I believe Timuchin will be back next week to reclaim his throne, but he doesn't have as nice graphics as I do, so that's not going to happen.
A photo of David Moyes,
there you go. That's I mean, it's virtual porn almost. He's a handsome chap. His eyes just stare right into your soul, into your precious. But yeah, for everybody else, the Thursday show will be on tomorrow night with me, Brian, and the usual ragtag crew. So make sure you are following us on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter. Blue Sky, Mastodon, Estee Lauder, the I don't know, U-Haul, whatever you want to follow us on, we'll be there. But make sure you're smashing and tapping those like buttons. But we're off to Betty Boys to have our hot chocolate and our cookie and go to sleep like nice, responsible adults while we dream of Alan getting a very, very uncomfortable but not career-ending injury in his soccer game. We don't mean that, but we did hear him fall over. So Shay, thank you for joining us. Glenn, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always. And everybody else, make sure you're tuning in. Have a fantastic evening, a great weekend. I hope your team wins unless they're Brentford. Sorry again. And we will see everybody next time. Peace out. Have a good one. Here's the funky music.